While they're getting comfortable, when Shannon asked me to facilitate this panel, she told me about the topic and I was fascinated with it. About 4 years ago, one of my customers, one of my organizations that I train for, they said, we have a particular need. They said, our young workforce is really good at getting information. They all have phones, and when they need information, they just go to Google and find it. But they said the problem is they get so much information that they have a hard time filtering out the fact from the fiction. Now here's the interesting thing about this conversation. A couple of months later, I had another customer call me and say the very same thing. Please help us help our workforce figure out the difference between fact and fiction. And if that weren't enough, a couple of months later, I had a third customer call me with that very same request. So that tells me that we are onto something really important today. So I'm excited about the panel. Cherokee Ballard and Ted Struley and Dick Briar will all be introducing themselves. So you get to use the lapel mic too. Yeah. That way everybody has a mic, right?
I don't have a lapel. I don't have a lapel. I'll give that to you. Didn't work.
So Cherokee, are you ready? Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello. Hi, everybody. My name is Cherokee Ballard, and I'm very thrilled to be here today to be part of this panel. I currently am the communications manager for One Gas, the parent company of. Hello. Never had problems with the microphone before. Just kidding. Oh, here we go. Okay, so I'm the communications manager for Oklahoma Natural Gas at One Gas, Oklahoma Natural Gas parent company. We're over Oklahoma, Texas, and Kansas, a job I've been in for about 7 years. And prior to that, I was the communications manager, public information officer, legislative liaison, and administrator temporarily, and all around troubleshooter for the medical examiner's office. Anybody remember that gig I had? And we'll be hearing some stories about that today. And then prior to that, I had the honor of being in many of your living rooms for almost 25 years as a news anchor, reporter, journalist, investigator, and all-around troubleshooter for that role. So, very happy to be here today.
Thank you, Cherokee.
Come on, right? That would sound good. Okay. I'm Ted Struley. I'm the editor and associate publisher at the Journal Record. I've been there 14 years now. I've been in the newspaper business for about 30 years. In Northern California and Texas and here. And during the course of that career, I was a reporter for a long time. I've been an editor, a publisher, and like Cherokee and Dick have covered all kinds of things. Dick and I did the Oklahoma News Report together. I got a little segment on a show for, how long did we do that? A decade, more or less. And then Dick moved on, but we get to do a lot of this kind of thing together, all three of us, so glad to be here.
Thanks, Ted, and thanks, Cherokee. I'm Dick Briar. I'm general manager at KGOU Radio, your NPR source. Before joining KGOU again, I started my career there actually as a student in college at OU. I was, for 25 years, news anchor, news director, managing editor, host of various programs, including the Oklahoma News Report, featuring Ted Struley on Fridays, at OETA. Before that, as Cherokee well knows, I was a sportscaster for many years. We were actually colleagues, so I'm a longtime friend and admirer of Cherokee Ballard, to be sure. I'm also a lawyer and a journalist, which actually those two work pretty well together.
Thank you, panel. My first question, in an age of postmodernism, relative anyway, why does the truth matter?
Who wants to take it?
Go ahead.
Well, because it's the foundation on how we make our decisions. It's the foundation on how we respect people. To me, the truth is paramount to everything you do. It goes to the core of who you are. And if the truth is not important to you, then how can people respect you? Truth is important in everyday life, every decision you make. I just think it's something that we all should seek.
Anybody else want to weigh in?
Critical to democracy. I think we have to have a shared dialogue, and we also have to have a shared basis of facts and language, and we need to be able to discern what really is truthful and what is not. Otherwise, we're off the rails if we're operating outside of the lines where we don't know the difference between what is true and what is fiction.
Thank you, Nate.
I'll just hear a lot of the same themes this afternoon, but oh, that one's working now.
You've got a new microphone.
Mics everywhere now. I think one of the things that's important, we're all going to say the same thing, that a democratic society can't function without truthful information. And when we start wading into the idea that facts are kind of soft and movable, and that this set of facts might be just as good as this set, only one thing is really the truth, and we have to remember that, or I think at least the three of us up here would agree we're going to end up in a lot of trouble.
Thank you, Ted. Next question is, what is the role of journalists in reporting news, and how has social media changed that landscape?
I'll start. So I would actually want to say a couple things about this. When a journalist goes out to report a story, I think it's pretty commonly understood that we are expected to be your eyes and ears and reveal to you what you weren't there to see and hear for yourself. I think it is equally important and less widely understood, however, that you also expect us to be your brain in that situation, right? That you expect us to engage in a little bit of critical thinking about what we're seeing and hearing before we report it back to you, because that's what you would do if you were there, right? So anecdotally, to sort of paint that picture, let me say that if we were walking down Robinson and there was a man who used to hang out in front of the Quiznos out there for many years, and you'd walk by, we'd see him every day, and he was always doing this and like that. And one day, because we're reporters, we asked him what he was doing, and he explained that he was grabbing the good karma out of the air and rubbing it on himself. Now, if I happen to see him and ask him what color the sky is, and he says it's pink, and then I run into Dick at the next store, and he tells me the sky is blue. If I report to you that Jim said it's pink, Dick said it's blue, you decide, that would be crazy, right? Why would I report it that way, right? But I would have given them equal credibility. I'd have engaged in no critical thought whatsoever on your behalf. My job as a journalist, when this guy says it's pink and this guy says it's blue, is to look up, right? Look up. It's blue. That guy's crazy. He's telling the truth, and I can pretty well report to you that while there may be some dissenters, really the sky is blue, right? So part of the journalist's role is not only to report to you what we see and what we hear, but to ask some questions, do a little digging, and engage in some critical thought so that we are confident that what we are reporting to you is the truth as best we know it.
As Carl Bernstein told me recently, we seek the best obtainable version of the truth using verifiable. That's what we're supposed to do. Journalists are trained and motivated to see the smoke and look for the fire. We can we tell stories. And on another level, we also have an obligation to our viewers, our listeners, our readers, the people that we serve, the news consumers, to do the heavy lifting in holding powerful institutions, people, and government entities and organizations accountable on their behalf.
I think social media has changed the landscape in several ways, but honestly, I think it has changed it in a way that is frightening a bit to me, because many times people who are out on a scene will capture an image and put it out there, and like the video showed us, we don't know the whole story. this woman seemed brutal, but in the end, she was really trying to help her people. And so I think a lot of times social media can be damaging to a story until all the facts come through. And what Ted said about, gathering all the information and looking at it through a critical eye, I think a lot of times social media doesn't provide that.
Thank you. Since gathering truth is what you all do, help us out. How do we figure out a way to discover the truth? My customers, my clients are dying to know that. So what do you use? What is the method, the filter to get to the truth?
We Google it.
We check social media and see what they're saying.
I think your gut is your best check. And my gut served me very well when I was working at the medical examiner's office. Many times, one in particular case that I will share was, you probably read about it in the news, a Senate bill was about to be passed to create a position at the medical examiner's office for a senator in exchange for her seat, and a very high-paying position. And I was called to a meeting at the Capitol along with the former deputy director of the OSBI, and they seek truth and solve cases. And here I am, former journalist, always a journalist really, in a meeting, and we were told this is dead man's talk, so don't tell anybody, but here's the plan. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to create this position, we're going to bring this person in at a very high salary, and it will be for 3 years until this person can get to retirement. We're going to put this person in this seat, and this is going to happen behind closed doors. We walked out of there, and we both looked at each other and said, wow, looks like this is going to happen. And we get back to the office, we hold a meeting with our core staff people, and within an hour, I had Nolan Clay from the Daily Oklahoman sitting in my office asking questions. And I'm like, wow, that didn't take long. So sources are very critical to holding people accountable. Someone in that small meeting decided to call because they didn't feel it was right. And it wasn't me, because I was shocked when he was sitting there. I said, hang on a minute. And so everything unraveled from there. The governor vetoed the bill that had been signed into law. And then I was asked to sit down and tell what happened in that meeting. And he knew specific questions and things that had been said. And I was not going to not tell the truth. And as a result of that, those 2 lawmakers were charged with crimes, and one was convicted and one pleaded guilty. Not fun for me at all, honestly, but you come to me with a question and this all happened, and I'm not going to not tell you the truth. And it was wrong what was about to happen, because that was wrong for the taxpayers of Oklahoma, it was wrong for the agency, it was wrong for everybody involved. So that discovering the truth was quite a lesson, a life lesson for me.
I would say I would encourage everyone, every citizen, to act as a journalist. Before you share something, before you repeat something, before you trade an innuendo, something that could be harmful to someone and certainly something that could be wrong, check it out. What do? We look for at least 2 sources. We look for credible sources. I remember, and this goes to the social media question, I remember when Austin Box, the OU linebacker, died, and it was all over social media. We heard that this might have happened, and then it started popping up on social media. Well, it would have been really easy just to hit share, retweet. Well, some people say that this happened without any attribution. I actually called Cherokee, left a message. You were slammed that day. But I was looking for sources. We did not report that until we could confirm through at least 2 sources that it actually had happened.
And he called me because I was at the medical examiner's office, which is where his body was taken. And I knew he was there. I knew what had happened. And his father called me. I had met his father at an event years prior, and he said, we respectfully ask that you not share anything. And I said, absolutely not. You tell me when you're ready, and that's yours to share, not ours. Now, granted, it was a public document. Anytime someone comes through the medical examiner's office, those documents can and should be made public. But that was not happening at that moment, and I said, you tell me when you're ready, and that's yours to reveal, not ours. So I'm inundated with phone calls from the media because they all knew his body was there. What happened? That was not mine to share. That was out of respect for anybody there. So, yeah.
And for some of us, it was a lot more important to be respectful of that and to be ethical in our reporting than it was to trade in innuendo.
So getting at the truth is think like a journalist on there. I will remember that.
Elaborate on that from a different angle, if that's okay. What we've been talking about is how journalists the truth, right? So when a story in our paper, a reporter writes it, an editor reads it and questions whatever raises our eyebrows, then another editor reads it and questions whatever raises his eyebrows, and then a third editor reads it before it gets printed, right? And we still make mistakes, but that's a pretty thorough system as a backup in case the reporter overlooks something or has numbers that don't add up quite right, or some number just sticks out and seems outrageous or unbelievable, which, by the way, is an excellent litmus test. If it seems outrageous and unbelievable, it probably is. But I like to suggest we turn that question around the other way, and instead of how a journalist might go about discerning the truth, because we go to school for that, and then editors beat us up over it for a while, and eventually we figure out how to get the right answers. But as a consumer of news and information, it's also important that you be able to discern whether what you're reading is truthful or what you're hearing or watching, whether that's in a newspaper or on a website or on social media or whatever. And I'll take just a second to show you kind of what editors do to try to make sure they're telling you the best available version of the truth. And in one of the handouts I left on your chairs, there's some examples of sentences that I'll call your attention to for just a minute. And there's 3 examples there, and all of them kind of do the same thing, and just illustrate how much difference a little bit of wording can mean, right? I noticed in the subtitles on the video that one of the people responding on social media said, she makes me nauseous, and I wanted to yell, no she doesn't, she makes you nauseated. They mean 2 entirely different things, go look it up. So that little difference in word can completely change the meaning, or more often, in the case of news reporting, it can change your perception of what happened, right? And my pet peeve this year during the legislative session, that's a common one in newspapers, is a reporter using the word despite to start a sentence, right? It's this big red flag that goes up, right? And so I think the first example on this list, I brought glasses, I can wear them. Over 50. Right, and this was one that really occurred in our paper. Despite 3 sessions this year, the legislature has been able to come up with a budget, right? That implies that they've done something wrong, that they've failed in some way, right? That might have come in a little different and said after 3 sessions this year, which kind of suggests they spent a really inordinately long time on it, but doesn't suggest they did anything wrong, right? Or that reporter could have just written, the legislature's been unable to come up with a budget, which is pretty neutral, but doesn't really give you any context or background, right? But all 3 of those are absolutely 100% true, right? No fake news in there anywhere. They're all 100% true, but you walk away with 3 very different impressions of what happened. And there are kind of levels of truth in news reporting, or what we're at the moment calling fake news, right? And so fake news, if you flip that piece of paper over, fake news has been around forever, right? You all remember the Weekly World News at the supermarket checkout stands. They were the best at the outrageous covers, right? No one mistook that ever for anything truthful, right? Well, someone probably did, but most people knew that was purely entertainment, even though it was presented as news. There wasn't a lot of confusion there. And when you watched Walter Cronkite on CBS, or you picked up, the New York Times, there wasn't any question about whether that news report was truthful. We assumed they were telling the truth as best they knew it, right? And what we have now are kind of degrees, by and large, thanks to social media.
So while we're waiting for the microphones to get restored, Ted did a great job segueing into what is fake news. Is it a cultural phenomenon? The Egyptians, if you could read hieroglyphics, would you read fake news on the pyramids? So is it a phenomenon?
It's availability of platform, right? If you are in business, you know all about barriers to entry, right? So in 1985, if you wanted to be in the newspaper business, you had to own CompuGraphic machines, you had to have a darkroom, you had to have layout flats, you had to have access to a printing press, you had to have some typesetting equipment, you had to be able to make halftones, you had to do a lot of stuff. It was a very expensive business to get into, right? And then Steve Jobs screwed it all up, right? And all of a sudden, anybody who wanted to could go buy a PC and a desktop publishing program, and they too could be in the newspaper business, whether they knew what they were doing or not, right? And that person's ability to discern fact from fiction or tell the best available in the moment may not have been trained to do. Move that forward into the 90s, when we all had access to the internet and Facebook and Twitter and those platforms came along. And if you thought anybody could be a news publisher when they got a Mac SE, boy, now really anybody could be a news publisher, right? And part of it, I think, is our own doing, because for the last 100 years, if you read it and it looked like news, it was probably true, right? With the exception of the supermarket tabloids. If it was on newsprint, if it was on the evening news, you could rely on that. Well, all of a sudden, in the last 20 years, platforms have come along that look just like news, video or text. They look and sound just like news, but there's, some guy living in his mom's basement producing it. And that surface litmus test of, I know this is a legitimate source because it looks like a legitimate source, is no longer a valid test.
I think one of the things that has separated real journalists from other people is operating under a set of standards, which includes ethics. We have established standards. We're trained. We are disciplined for getting outside of those standards, operating outside of those standards. And to Ted's point, this idea in the last 20 years probably of citizen journalism, that makes my skin crawl. Do we have citizen knee surgeons? No, we don't have citizen journalists either. And the Walter Cronkites and the New York Times and those sources that for decades everyone trusted
operated within those professional standards. And I think what really makes this idea of fake news difficult now is that there is so much stuff out there, but it's not vetted professionally, and it's up to the consumers to actually do some of that vetting anymore.
And I think consumers also feel when they're talking about television news, so you could use the term sensational news, fake news, kind of like along those same lines. If it bleeds, it leads. All of those things that I think a lot of television news companies and stations are criticized for, a lot of that goes back to those standards that I think when people ask me, do you miss it? It's been 10 years since I've been in TV news. I do, of course. It was something that was a big part of my life. But I also don't miss the fact that I feel like things have changed a bit. That those standards have maybe moved a bit, where if it bleeds, it leads is what's the most sensational thing? Let's get out there first. We're the first there. Where are the facts? And I think that that's something that consumers can hold stations and reporters and journalists responsible.
Tim, if it's okay, I'm following a minute, because part of that question was what is fake news? And there are really a lot of different definitions. And there's the blatantly fake news, like the Weekly World News cover I gave you, right? And there's the moderately fake news, right? That contains some piece of the truth. And on that same handout, I copied something off the internet that was a big deal about 6 months ago. And the headline all over the internet was that Donald Trump had callously hosted a party for the NRA at the White House on the anniversary of the Sandy Hook massacre. All right, on its face, and with that headline, that sounds pretty outrageous, does it not? Well, it wasn't true. There was a little bit of truth to it, but largely it was not true. What had occurred was there was in fact a party at the White House that night. It was the anniversary of Sandy Hook, but it was not a party for the NRA, right? It was a large party with a lot of different people. One of the guests in attendance was Wayne LaPierre from the NRA, and somebody got a photo of LaPierre talking to Trump or shaking hands with Trump. And the one group with a particular political leaning grabbed onto that nugget, twisted it significantly, and flooded the internet with it, right? So there's that, okay, there was a little bit of truth to this, but the way it was presented, it was entirely false. And I think it's important to point out right at the moment that this is not the purview of one political leaning or the other. We see examples of it coming from both extremes in both parties. The other really sticky definition of fake news, at the Tulsa World, when someone declines to renew their subscription, they get a phone call from an editor asking why they don't want the paper anymore. And one editor, Mike Strain up there, who's a friend of mine, told me one day he's making the calls, right? It's his turn to make the calls. That is not duty any editor wants. But he's calling subscribers to say, hey, how come you don't want my paper anymore? And what he kept hearing was, I'm tired of fake news. Well, when a journalist hears that, what we think you are saying is, you are making up stories. You are fabricating facts. You are telling us a fairy tale. And we find that incredibly offensive, right? When someone suggests that that's what we're doing. I mean, that's our only job is to show up every day and tell the truth. It's an easy job. That's all we do. And to hear somebody, what we're hearing is, no, you're lying to us, is just appalling. What Mike found as he pursued that line of thought a little bit further is that that wasn't what most people meant. What most people meant was, I feel like there is some subtle bias in the way you are reporting the news. That your word choices, like despite 3 special sessions, right, are suggesting that you are coming at this from a particular political point of view that I don't agree with, even though it's entirely factual. And the frustrating thing for us is, a lot more of that is probably perception than reality, because most editors are on high alert to keep that kind of stuff out of their papers. But we don't keep it out of every wire story. We certainly intentionally don't keep it out of opinion pieces that run on the op-ed page. 60 Minutes did a great piece about a year ago on fake news. One of the things one of the panelists said in that is that we've become a society that is consuming affirmation over information, and that we're more interested in having someone tell us we're right than we are in getting the truth and then making decisions based on information that we might find unpleasant or uncomfortable. And that is a dangerous turn in the way we're viewing news and facts, but it goes right to the heart of how people are subtly deciding something is fake news.
And I think that's critical, that people are deciding. It's not that we get a big fax or an email every morning from the mythical home office saying, okay, here's how you're going to distort the news today, right? We don't get that. What happens more often than not is bias. Bias is in the eyes of the beholder. So the person that says, well, I detected some bias in the way you wrote that story. Well, what were you expecting? Often it's they expected it to be written a certain way, maybe to confirm their own bias, right? And when that word was not used, or that approach was not taken, nobody really looks inside and says, well, maybe I'm biased. It's, oh, you guys are biased. So I think we have to be a little bit more discerning about what that really means. Bias tends to be in the eyes of the beholder. About 6 months ago, we had some journalists in our station from Bangladesh. And one of them asked me about bias, and I told him that, and he said, oh, I understand it now. Bias is really by us. By us. Now, are we biased in the way we report stories? Sure, it can come across that way, but usually it comes across as biased because of what the listener or the reader or the viewer's expectation is. And if you see a particular story told a certain way in one place, and then it's told differently in other places, who's biased? Confirmation bias plays in because people, like Ted says, people want to have their own views affirmed. So they're looking for confirmation of what they already believe. And if you don't confirm through your words and your stories what they want to be true, then they believe that you must be biased.
Thank you. Next question. How do we, who are not professional journalists, how do we expose the truth? What tips would you have for us? What counsel would you have for us?
And talk really loud.
Vet everything. There are mainstream, what we now have labeled legacy media, are still doing what we've always done. We're verifying facts and we're reporting the truth. There's a difference between a news story and an opinion piece. They're in different parts of the paper. They're labeled accordingly. Opinion is supposed to be opinion. News is news. Journalists, absolutely. We all have opinions. We all have preferences and biases. We all vote. Some of us belong to one party. Some belong to another. I think it is astonishing, though, that while people believe that police officers and judges and ministers and lots of other professional people can set their personal opinions aside and conduct their job in a professional, unbiased manner, that somehow journalists are the only people in the world incapable of doing that. And, you know, we're trained to do that. We pay careful attention to that. Of course we have opinions. We put them on a shelf when we write a news story. If we're going to express them publicly, we put them on the opinion page. There are a couple of websites. They're on that sheet. Snopes is a good one. The Associated Press has a weekly updated fact-checking page that will kind of give you the fake news stories of the week and either confirm or debunk them. So if you happen to see something on Facebook that you think is questionable, or even if you see something in something you perceive to be a legitimate news source and it doesn't ring true to you, those are excellent places to go vet it and check it out.
I would say question everything. And I would also say investigate everything. I have a dear friend in the room who is very good at that. And she is questioning and investigating a lot lately. And she's exposed me to a lot of information I didn't have before. But I think the more you question and investigate, and don't be afraid, that's a hard thing. One of my other friends was in a situation recently, and she said, I can't do anything about it, but there was something that was going on that was criminal, and she said, I'm afraid to do anything about it. And I said, well, I'm not. So I'll make the phone call for you. And that's a hard place, because if you, as a consumer, are finding out something that is wrong out there that you want investigated or changed or corrected, to not be afraid to do something about it. That's a tough stance to take. I've done it.
Last question. What does good citizenship, I'm going to try that again. What does good citizenship and the truth look like? What does it look like for us as good citizens to adhere and pursue and embrace the truth and be champions of the truth?
Okay, I keep going first. I may as well just keep going. Silence is implicit consent. Okay? When I would encourage you, if you want to be a good citizen on that front, when you see something on Facebook that you think is not true and it's being presented as fact, check it out, find out if it's true or not. And if it's not true, say so. Don't just let it go by. There's an extraordinary amount of stuff that, as Cherokee was just describing, goes by because you don't want to pick the fight, you don't want to have the confrontation. When I talk to journalism students, I often say the best book ever written for journalists was written for 6-year-olds, because it says somebody has to be willing to stand back and say, hey, the emperor's not wearing any clothes, right? Somebody has to be willing to do that. And by and large, that's journalists. You now find yourself in that role when you're watching friends, relatives, oh my God, my cousin in Denver. You know, if you just let it go because you're afraid of the potential confrontation, you're helping spread the falsehood. And you have to have the courage to say, respectfully, politely, say, I'm sorry, this isn't true, and here's how I can verify that.
There's a question you can ask that can be very enlightening. Some people are put off by it. When you hear something like that, you can say, how do you know that? Say it in a way, though, that is not really questioning their values or who they are or anything like that. Say it sincerely from the standpoint of, I'd like to know more about that. I think we have to learn, number one, how to be engaged citizens. We have to be educated citizens. We need educated citizens. Everyone in this room and beyond has the opportunity to be that. We increasingly have elections, and we know this to be true based on data, that have consequences. Voting is done by people often that are what we call low information voters. They don't really know the issues. They don't understand the issues. I think it's incumbent on everyone to learn, to engage, to ask questions. How do you know? Why do you believe that to be true? I'd like to know more. And finally, I think it's really important that we practice how to have those civil conversations. I did this with a class at OU. It was a mass media law class, and it was right after the 2016 elections, and so there were people up and down and all around and very emotional. And I detected that I needed to say something to my class because they were all getting ready to go home for Thanksgiving, and you could see the train coming, right? They saw it, we all saw it. Here's what I told the students in the class. When you go home for Thanksgiving, consider doing this. When you're gathered around the table, when you're there with your family, your friends, the people that are closest to you, talk about religion and politics. And yeah, sure. Everybody goes, oh, can't do that. Can't do that. And I said, exactly, you can't do that because you don't know how to. You have to practice it. How can you ever be good at it? How can you ever learn to truly actively listen to the other person and to come up with solutions, not fighting, if you don't practice it? So we have to learn, I believe, we have to learn how to have those civil discussions, those civil conversations that lead to good consequences and hopefully consensus.
Dick, could you refer them to the handout on 7 and some of those pointers?
Sure. There is a handout, and I don't want to belabor the point too much because you can go over it. Real quick, there are just some things on this list. Think about it. When you're having a difficult conversation with someone, try using some of these techniques. I would say the main one, and I hear this from people repeatedly, is to listen. So many times people just want to be listened to and not attacked and not demeaned. So look over that list. Don't ridicule people. Don't try to change their values. Listen to what they have to say. Choose your words carefully. Words matter. Words have meaning. Words can hurt. Choose your words carefully. Take a look at that list, and I would encourage everyone to be a leader in showing others how to have that civil conversation.
Gosh, so much has been said. To talk about being good citizens, I feel the company I work for now, that is one of our core values, is to have the courage to bring something to the forefront and to not be afraid to talk about it and to be transparent with the information you have. I feel like that's really important for all of us. I do have a story. I keep going back to the medical examiner's office. I'm so sorry. But I do have a story regarding some information that came back to me as the public information officer there that, about an investigation that had taken place within the agency by another state agency. So it was a Department of Human Services employee who had investigated something going on in our agency. And someone came to me and said, we feel like this is wrong. She is working with these other employees to create a bad atmosphere. And we had paid her a lot of money to be our investigator. And she was really crossing the line in too many ways. And this person was very fearful when they came to me and said, what can we do? And I said, well, we have to stop it because it's costing the agency money. It's not doing anybody any good. All the employees involved were being harmed in a way, not physically, but, and so I went and exposed it to the right person, and it got stopped, and then the media got wind of it, and they came to talk to me about it because they got a hold of all of the emails that were going back and forth. Long story. And the bottom line was, they said, well, what do you want out of this? And I said, our money back. And that was, of course, the portion of the interview they used, but that was the bottom line. We wanted our money back because she was not doing the right thing. And so that good citizen came to bring a problem to light to me, and we were able to handle that. You're welcome.
Thank you. Well, what do you take away from today? The one thing that I take away is I heard be a listener. Speak up for the truth. When you hear it, stand up. Don't wait for someone else to say it. And one thing that Dick said, that this is your homework. This is what I want to encourage you to do. I want you to go out and find someone who has a belief that is just the opposite of yours, and listen to them. And listen to them in a way where you're conveying, I'm patient, I'm trying to hear you, I'm trying to understand your point of view. So, Shannon?
Sure.